Whereas you come into the world of business and it's this whole open landscape where you need to figure out, well, what industry you want to serve? What is the product that I'm going to do? Is it digital? Is it like so many? And so you have to go through a process. And perhaps the people who find success faster are the ones that more quickly get to that very defined or become very clear on who they're serving, how they're facilitating that, how they're going to market that.
Welcome to the Art of Success podcast and this episode with Simon Jeffries. Now, Simon is not only a good friend, however, he is a great mindset coach too, former Special Forces and co-founder, co-owner of The Natural Edge. Now, we discuss a ton of stuff and it's always weird interviewing a mate because obviously I know him outside of this too, but it's we covered some really fertile ground on how to build a mindset and also how to apply the lessons that Simon learned in the Special Forces to your life and your pursuit of freedom, of growth, and the life that you want to live. Let's start here because I think it's quite interesting. I remember when we first started working together, you spoke to me about like creating freedom, and it was very much like the lifestyle business and the opportunities to do whatever you wanted when you wanted. It was like time freedom, I think was a big thing for you. You've just got an in-person, well, a real office on real estate. So like, can you talk me through that decision?
Yes. So that when we started off exactly as that, when we've decided that we wanted a business, the two rules were geographical freedom and scalability. So I think, so this office has fallen out of a few things. One, how hard it is to actually build a business. And I'll caveat this with it comes down to, I guess, goals versus, yes, it comes down to goals, because we're in a position now where we could, if we just cut everything down to just myself and John. So, because right now there's myself and John who founded it. We have a full-time videographer, James. We've got a full-time sales guy, Joe. And we've got a nearly full-time guy doing more corporate stuff, G. If we got rid of all of them and it was just John and I, we could probably, I think, work 20 to 30 hours a week and probably get to that, have like a low six-figure salary. So a nice quality of life. And a lot of that time freedom. Because, and I think, so maybe our objectives have changed a little bit in the sense of a longer term brand building strategy, and actually work as we brought James on and brought a couple of people on. It kind of came back to the feeling that we had when we were in the military. So that team environment, and maybe we had overlooked the power of that. So initially it was like, oh, we'll have this freedom so, I can move wherever. And actually, I think my relationship ties into this as well. Mel definitely values having roots down in one place. We moved to Bristol in the process within the last 2 years. Really like the city. There's a lot here that I value. And so I think as things in my life have changed and the business has slightly evolved, how we actually, it's changed the setup. And what I've realized for having an office, so we got the office partly because we realized that when we're all together, it's much more powerful for idea collaboration and just getting effective work done. Once we actually got it, something that I realized very quickly is how much better I feel mentally having a separation from work or home. Having worked at home for the last 5 years, pretty much, I think particularly in the last 6 months, that starts to take its toll. And now having a separation and coming in and being around basically mates like we're in the military and working, I'm really seeing the positive benefit of that. So I think long term, the ideal scenario is almost a bit of a hybrid between having a fixed base, but also it's like, hey, if you want to go away for 2 weeks, and I think the long-term aim is, especially in the winter months, right, let's just rent a villa for the month in January for the team. Anyone wants to come out, we can work from there. But we've also got this, for most of the time, a solid base in the UK. So I think more of a hybrid. So rather than being completely remote or completely fixed, I think a hybrid model long term is actually going to be what suits us best. And this probably comes to the main.
Go on, sorry.
No, I was only going to finish with saying it probably comes to the overall point of things just change. Like, everything's a process. And as we change and evolve, what I thought I wanted at the time, which was still valid, has now slightly changed or been amended with how other parts of life has changed.
Yeah. It's interesting how you're zigging when everyone else is zagging. Like the majority of the world is becoming is seeking that remote working. It's like, fuck this, I'm not going back into the office. Like I want this freedom. But you've found that like an element of structure creates some predictability and has a whole host of benefits. And like part of what's reading between the lines and also knowing you outside of this conversation, obviously too, like you seem to have become either clearer on drivers and values, or something shifted. Like there's that urge. Like, so what do you? Yeah, that's sparked something.
I think you said that. I think that values, because what you said there, I think that's part of it. Because I think I think there's a difference. If I was going into an office where, okay, the work's okay, but you know, you're working with people. Some people you get on with, some people you don't. Versus, we've got an office which we've built in our vision. So we are working with people that we really want to be around, that we've hired into the company because they hold the same values. As you know, it's no surprise every single employee is ex-military, either people we've served with, but in fact, they are all people we've either served with or known before, apart from Joe, who went through one of our programs. And so coming into this it's work, but it feels like you're coming in to be with your mates and get work done, as opposed to coming into work, if that makes sense. So I can see, whereas if you don't have that, it's probably that's going to be very different than going to a place that just feels like a corporate environment. Yeah.
So part of like, when you become like clear on your values, or when you become, when you have to like evolve, there's that death and rebirth cycle. There's the phoenix burning and the ash and rising from the ashes and all that kind of stuff. What did you have to give up personally to like make that decision? Like, did you have to change beliefs?
I think I made a distinction between an idea of what I wanted and realizing actually what I really enjoy. So, and it's funny you talked about that structure and routine and predictability. I have realized that I do enjoy a predictable routine. And actually, when I look at, so I've lived in several different countries, you know, before I joined the military, Canada, New Zealand, America for a bit, but backpacking never appealed. This probably sums it up. Backpacking never appealed to me when I was younger, but going to a place, being in a different place, being in a different culture, but creating a routine very quickly within that, i.e. getting a job, getting into the community, but having a set structure where I'm going to go and do my training, know where the gym, like all these things. So I like being in different places, but I like structure within that. So actually for me, rather than maybe in my head at the beginning, I like the idea of a more nomadic, entrepreneurial type lifestyle, but actually realized for me, having the ability to go to places, as I said, so going somewhere for a month or 2 months, creating a routine there, staying there, you know, say in the winter months or whatever it is, great. And then come back and you've got a place in Bristol and that's set up. So it's like I can create these structured routines, but have the flexibility to do that in different places if I want to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because when you start out on your journey into entrepreneurship, you were pursuing what kind of was sold as the dream, like working from a laptop or like on the beach and that kind of stuff. But like, it just didn't jibe with you by the sound of it. Like you wanted that, the structure, the structure and the freedom that creates, which is a very different kind of freedom. And it sounds like you've gone from goal-based as well, like this is the outcome, to actually how can I make the process more enjoyable, which is what you're talking about there. It's like having blokes around you who you get on with. It's the kind of that journey in itself is way more engaging.
Yeah, I think it's that definition of freedom, like you said. So it's the freedom of who we choose to work with in terms of our team and in terms of customers, like getting much clearer on that and driving that piece to create that satisfaction and the freedom so having that flexibility that we can move to, say, different places if we wanted to. So if we did want to go abroad or go to a different part of the country, then we can do that. But probably what it's going to look like is whenever that happens, it's then creating a new routine and structure around it. So I think it's the definition of what that freedom means or how it best aligns with my values more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just a quick favor to ask, my friends. If you could head to wherever you listen to this podcast and leave a very kind review, that will not only help my ego virtually explode, but it will help people just like you find the podcast too, and hopefully help them to their next level.
So something I want is a big left turn, dude, but like something that I want to ask you, because I don't think anyone's asked you before, or I haven't heard anyone ask you. Like, everyone talks about the lessons that you took from the military and applied to entrepreneurship. I think that's the obvious kind of way to think about it. Is there anything that you've learned through entrepreneurship and business that you wish you knew how many years ago?
That is a good question. So I'm just thinking it through now. I don't know if there is. It's such a different journey. Like I've definitely found setting up a business far harder than anything in the military, purely because in the military, the metrics are so much more defined. It's a 6-month course, or whatever it is, 8 months of basic training, 6-month course for selection, and very defined parameters to meet on it. Whereas there's so many more variables and intangibles of business that you could do it for two years. For example, Jax Davey, who started Rolling Rogues, 2 years, sold it to Berkshire Hathaway, and then is working for another company. Very fast success within that. And then you get others. We've been going for 5.5 years, and it feels like we're still, it still doesn't feel completely stable, and we're still sort of iterating and finding our way in many respects. I'll keep thinking about that as we have this conversation, but there's nothing, because it's everything from the military is in having that strong conviction for what you're doing, having that flexible mindset to adapt to problems, having that growth mindset, that you're focusing on the process and not the result. It's kind of, I think, everything. Those are attributes that served that were already there. I think the difference is, what I will say is, perhaps in slightly different ways, I've had to call on a lot of those things more on this journey than I had to do in the military. So it's almost like the principles are the same, but I've had to, in many ways and in kind of different ways, so less on the physical, but definitely in a mental and mindset way, call on those more.
So interesting. Like, it's so interesting, because especially the outside perception of the military is that you're the height of those things. But I suppose you're surrounded by people who are constantly striving, or most people are striving to embody values, ethos. It's there, it's written, it's prescribed for you. And it's very kind of, like you said, the metrics are there, but also, okay, these are the criteria that you have to meet in order to develop your rank, in order to pass this course. It's there and it's obvious. Whereas, like, I think the thing that can really fuck with your head in entrepreneurship is, well, there's 1 trillion options to do at any given moment. Like, we're speaking about it before, like, you can be on 25 different social media platforms, or you can choose one and get really fucking good at it. You can work
individually with people in a bespoke way that I'm doing, or you can do cohort stuff that you guys are doing, or you can go to the masses and just produce a course for 25 quid that anyone can buy. And like, those are all options. And like, you can take any of them or all of them or none of them.
Yeah, that's the example. That's the exact example I was going to give that we were talking about earlier. There's just so many more options, and it's the variables. There's a lot more variables to choose from, as opposed to that very set criteria that you have in the military to follow. And I think, and also you make a good point about, you are surrounded in that environment the whole time with other people. There's that constant mutual support. Whereas on this journey, it can definitely be a more lonely one. And yeah, I think the lack of clarity, and maybe that in itself is a mindset shift, because like you said, if you're like very clear on, this is the route I'm going to go, this is the platform I'm going to use, this is the product and the rest of it, and get all of that in line, then things become easier. And actually that is the case, because as we have got clearer on things, on who we serve, and we're just going through another iteration of that, of getting a much clearer offer, everything does become easier. But perhaps it's just harder that's something you need to self-generate in the world of business. Whereas in the military, it's generated for you. You join whichever unit that you join, which are specialists in whatever, and there are very clear pathways within that. Even special forces you join, and then you're either in mountain troop or you're in mobility troop or whatever it is. And then you go into there and it's like, right, well, these are the skills you'll be learning because this is what you've been put into. Whereas you come into the world of business and it's this whole open landscape where you need to figure out, well, what industry you want to serve? What is the product that I'm going to do? Is it digital? Mm-hmm. Is it like so many? And so you have to go through a process. And perhaps the people who find success faster are the ones that more quickly get to that very defined, or become very clear on who they're serving, how they're facilitating that, how they're going to market that. Whereas for others, and we're probably in that as well, we're still kind of going through that process, and we're much clearer than we were. It's almost like we were at a 2-figure grid reference. Now we're getting towards a 4-figure, and we want to get to an 8-figure. And when you get to 8-figure, things really start to roll because you just have that very defined focus.
Precision. It's almost like you in the military, or kind of any kind of, I suppose, standard career, the rules of the game have been codified. And it's like, this is the, like, just like in any fucking sport, like golf or whatever, like, it's like, these are the 20 something rules that we've adhere by. These are all the caveats within them. This is when it applies. This is when it doesn't apply. And you've got that written out for you. Whereas you just enter this infinite game and it seems very simple from the outside. It's that classic thing. Starting something is way more complex than you initially give it credit for. So it's it's interestingly scary thing to do. You mentioned something that I want to touch on there, like the loneliness of the pursuit of this. I was speaking to a client today, and she's exactly in that position of like, she gets so focused and hyper focused, and I do this 100% of the time. So it's like you get wrapped by this mission of just like, okay, this is the objective, I'm going to do this, and your whole life becomes consumed by it. And you get like 5 minutes ago, actually, I haven't seen a human or spoken to a human that's outside the business in like 3 weeks. I should probably do that. How do you deal with that? Actually, how did you deal with it when it was just like more remote, and then how do you deal with that now?
Probably not very well, is the honest answer. Mm-hmm. So because it does become all consuming. So it's got better having this delineation. And I think it depends where the business is as well. And I haven't met anyone who's gone through the process of setting something up that in that first year or 2-year period, you do have to sacrifice a lot of that stuff, because it's on whether you get paid or not. It's completely on you. And especially as we talked about, when you're going through that phase of figuring everything out, and it is really hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And there's a reason that they don't. So I think you are going to go through that phase. The counter to that is, and something I did learn along that journey, is you always pay a price for it. If you don't have any energy and activities around what you're doing, your performance just degrades and gets worse. And so the more especially in the beginning, I think from the beginning, the better you can become at having, which is obviously what I would imagine working with people, having those boundaries around it and making sure you take time for those activities. Actually, even if it may not feel like it immediately, you're going to make more progress in the long term, because you're going to maintain a higher level of the output that you can give when you are working. So it is really, really important. But yeah, I was probably bad at it, and it's something that I learned the hard way and have tried to get better at. And probably the office is like another layer to help with that, because it creates a clear separation, as opposed to everything set up at home. And so it's very easy. I'll just go back and do another half an hour.
Yeah, get that. Is that where skateboarding comes into this?
I think that's a separate way. Well, kind of. That was it was a combination of something that I always wanted to do because it looks fun, but also, yes, it's a conscious effort to have activities outside of work and try and make more of an effort, in the same way of meet up with people more and make sure you don't let all those things slip.
Yeah, nice. I don't know why I love the idea of you skateboarding. I want to see more videos, more content.
It's painful.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it now?
Like a month, 2 months.
Okay.
But actually going back, it's probably another good principle. I realized, so I had a lesson just to get the initial basic stuff, and then went away for a month, and I didn't really do that much. And I went and had another lesson, and what he hammered me with was it's just time on the board. So I made a commitment for this month. So even if it's only 5 minutes, I will do something every day, even if it's a bit of balancing, or trying to do turns and stuff in the garden, just within a small space. Just do something, because it's that whole moving average and cumulative, like small wins, as opposed to I need to find an hour to do it.
Yeah, nice, really nice. Where are you looking at in terms of success now? What does success look like for you?
Yeah, we talked about this the other day. So success long term is growing the brand into something that I guess is recognized in that field. Almost like the legacy piece, I guess, something you can, built this, and this has helped a lot of people. Because that's the one thing that I always, if I'm going through stressful times with the business, which is usually always around the sales and marketing piece, I always get an uplift when I come off coaching calls or interactions with clients. And so that kind of longer term success piece is more around, well, the more people we help, then the more of that effect we can have. But actually success right now is more about stability and enjoying life. So that's our main aim right now, is let's get a stable, consistent sales pipeline to remove the monthly stress of, have we got enough to pay everyone? Have we got enough clients coming in? And just enjoy, as in, we would rather now not increase what we earn, but have more time just for ourselves outside of the business and just enjoy life, basically relax with it. And then maybe in a year, 2 years, it's like, right, okay, we're back on. Let's maybe now look at taking it to the next level. So right now it's about stability and work-life balance, I guess, is the best way to put it. Yeah.
Different phase in what you're doing. You mentioned there the kind of, if you're feeling stressed around sales and marketing, what have been the major beliefs that you've had to shift around sales and marketing?
Probably so we've realized a major flaw has been our offering. So being able to very clearly articulate, this is who we help, this is how we do it, and these are the tangible benefits that you'll get. And in fact, there's two beliefs, I think. So there's this one, and it's that catch-22 fear belief around, but if we get too specific, then what about these people? Whereas actually the more, your golden rule of most businesses, the more specific you can be, the more successful you'll be, because you're talking very clearly to that target market. You try and speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And so overcoming that belief of, oh, but what if we miss out on these people? It's like, no.
Yeah. So a tiny bit of scarcity in there.
Yes. Yeah. So that's that scarcity piece. And then alongside that is knowing your worth and your value. So charging what you're worth is, which has been an evolution. And I've seen Alex Mosley talk about this, that every time he's made a shift in his business, he's had to overcome a belief first. And I think prices and what you charge is definitely one of those for nearly everyone that I've spoken to. And so we've, from the very beginning, if you look where we started off, and every kind of year or 2 years, there's almost been a jump in prices. And that's probably a combination of, obviously, you get more experience, you get better at what you do and what you provide, and you get better results. So there's a natural increase around that. But if I look back, we started so low, like it was far below actually what we were delivering there. And so it took a good probably 2 or 3 years to really get to the point where it should have been. And that was all belief based. That was nothing to do with what we were delivering. We were already delivering more than good enough results that it should have been. It didn't match what we were charging, but they were low because it was a fear-based mentality around it.
Yeah, like okay, so we can always cut this out if you want to. What was the fear?
The fear, but people wouldn't pay it. So we didn't even. So really, it was because what we should have done is just tried it and see what happened. But that was the fear. The fear was, oh, well, people pay that for? Because I think, again, we were looking at it. We hadn't made the switch to the value is the result you get for someone, not in what you're giving. For example, we paid for a business course of a guy named Alex Becker. And I think it was $4,500. And if you assign that value to actually how he delivered it, it should have been like $150, because he just, it's completely off the cuff. He just sits down, there's no editing, doesn't cut out any of, he's always making these gargling noises and stuff, doesn't cut any of it out. He gets this scribble whiteboard thing up he uses with his mouse as he's doing it, and he just talks through. But he is so good, and his knowledge is so good that you'd pay probably double that, because it's just, you're like, this is, everything he says is gold. And so it's the value you get from it. And I've come back to that course so many times versus the actual delivery. Like the delivery is on Kajabi. It's so rough. It's so unpolished that it doesn't fit that price tag. But because he's so good at what he does, then that's what you're paying for. So you're paying for that result. And we hadn't made that switch. We're like, but we're just giving this 30-day, whatever it is. But it's like, well, that 30-day course has massively changed people's lives. Like, completely changed their life. And so that's what they're paying for. They're not paying for what you're actually how you're delivering that, I guess.
It's interesting you brought that piece up around the kind of the quality of delivery. And you had that Chris Williamson quote, or he might be paraphrasing somewhere else, where he says perfectionism is procrastination is perfectionism masquerading as quality control. And sometimes we kind of, like I found myself falling into that trap the whole time. This has to look a certain way. This has to be flawless. This has to have the feeling of quality to it. Whereas actually it's about, can you just deliver quality? And quality is meeting spec. Like that's really what you're trying to do. Can I provide what I've promised and a little bit more? And that lack of perfectionism, overcoming that perfectionism can be a rough ride.
Yeah, agreed. Perfectly sums it. You basically summed it up there.
What have you changed in regard to your approach to mindset that you would have like held tightly as a belief, I don't know, like 5 years ago?
Good question. What did I have? I mean, this is something we've spoken about before. And, when we first started going through the work, and so it's probably more around the relationship piece than business. And that's that whole fixed mindset of, well, this is just who I am, take it or leave it, versus switching that into a growth mindset of, oh, you can work on this, you can have difficult conversations, you can work through it and actually become a better partner, enjoy the relationship more, all of those things. So that's the one that jumps into my head straight away as something that was a fixed belief for a very long time. And then through the work that we did, that changed. I'm trying to think if there's anything in business. It's less of, I don't necessarily think this is a belief, but it ties back into that learning curve in the same way we did with the prices. We've had to learn that you have to tell people what they want to hear and then deliver what they need. When we first started marketing, we took a very logical approach. Well, this is what we is. Who wants it? Just like, we're going to provide this. Hey, do you want to come and have it? But the understanding that you have to delve into the psychology of marketing, copywriting, how you frame things. And that's been an evolution over the last few years. But it's once you make that switch, that's really powerful, because we've got a couple of friends that are kind of in a similar space, and you can see them going through the same evolution that we did and how much you kind of resist it. And again, it just has to be a belief shift over time. You have to get used to making that switch to what feels salesy. But what it comes down to is the fact that if you can't bring people in, you can't help them. And so you have to learn to play the game. And I think you can play it and still retain your integrity, but you do still have to play it.
Yeah, and it can feel duplicitous to begin with, but that's just because you're not very good at it and you've misunderstood how to do it. And it becomes like, clickbaity, kind of like get you in, get your attention, and that's when it feels shitty.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Nice. The question I always like to ask is, what's the hardest lesson that you've had to learn along this path?
Ooh. What is the hardest lesson along this path? Probably how long it takes to get to that point that you want to. I think you have that naive. We definitely did in the beginning. We'll just start something within a couple of years. It'll be great. You'll be your own boss and making the cash that you want and all the rest of it. And just realizing how long it can actually take to get to where you want to be. That's probably the hardest one, I think.
Yeah, but you kind of need that naivety to begin with, because otherwise you wouldn't fucking start.
Yeah, you wouldn't do it. Yeah.
There's no way. Like, if I knew what was involved in like the 7 or 8 years of it, was way easier ways to do that. Especially back then when I didn't understand like the grit and the toughness that I do now. I'm like, oh yeah, fuck that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Or if you could forecast the moments where I'm just stressed out in my mind and just cannot function in life because of the situation I've created for myself. There's no way you'd embark on that, but for some reason it's meaningful.
Agreed.
Right. Where can people follow you? Where can people find out more about what you do? Easiest
place. So Instagram, it's The Natural Edge. LinkedIn, it's Simon Jeffries. And YouTube, it's The Natural Edge, which we've been off the ball with, but we will be starting back up next week, in the next couple of weeks. So those are the main places. Yeah, I've been loving that. It's really nice to see the kind of how well thought out your content is. Really enjoying it personally. It's good. Slight last point, the reason why it's been paused is because we see YouTube great as a long-term strategy and being on that platform, but it requires a lot of work, and realizing this mistake or hole in our marketing with the offer, the priority is, okay, we need to put our energy and effort into fixing that, and then we'll pick this back up. So I guess it comes back to that lesson of you need to be flexible and adapt and not get caught into, if we stop posting on LinkedIn for a month, then it's all going to fall apart, which isn't the case. It's just a belief. And actually, so this is more critical, and then we'll pick that back up again. Yeah. That's the challenge, having such limited resources. And I suppose that is what the military prepares you for very well. It's like, you have what you have in this Bergen, and that's it. And then deal with the problem that you're facing. Make it work. Yeah. Yeah. No cuff. Exactly. Exactly, dude. Right. I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you very much for your time, man. Perfect. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.